Why smart people join cults. Most people believe they'd never join a cult. And honestly, that's exactly what you'd expect someone who's about to join a cult to say. We tend to imagine cult members as gullible, uneducated, desperate people who somehow got tricked into believing something ridiculous. The problem with that theory is that cults have recruited doctors, lawyers, engineers, military officers, celebrities, even college professors. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If intelligence isn't enough to protect you, then what is? Because here's the thing, cults don't usually start with strange robes, secret compounds, or a leader claiming to be an alien from the future. That comes later. A cult often starts with something much more ordinary, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of community, a feeling that you've finally found people who understand you. And that's what makes cults so fascinating. Not because they're weird, but because they reveal something about human nature that most of us would rather not admit. The truth is that cults don't exploit stupidity. They exploit features built directly into the human brain. And if you understand those features, you'll understand not only how cults work, but why perfectly intelligent people can end up believing things that seem completely insane from the outside. So today, we're going to reverse engineer the psychology of cults. And fair warning, you may recognize some of these mechanisms in places that aren't cults at all, or at least you didn't think they were. Let's begin. What actually is a cult? The word cult gets thrown around a lot. Sports fans call rival fan bases cults. People call multi-level marketing companies cults. Someone buys an expensive coffee machine and suddenly their friends are calling them a member of a cult. The internet is not exactly known for careful definitions or nuance. So what actually makes a cult a cult? Psychologists don't all agree on a single definition, but most cults share a handful of common characteristics. First, there's usually a charismatic leader, someone who presents themselves as having special knowledge, special wisdom, or special authority. Second, there's a strong us versus them mentality. Members are encouraged to see themselves as different from and often superior to outsiders. Third, there's control. Control over information, control over behavior, control over relationships. And finally, there's dependency. The group gradually becomes the primary source of identity, meaning, and truth. Notice something interesting. None of these things sound particularly ridiculous. That's because cults don't begin with ridiculous ideas. If they did, nobody would join. Imagine someone walks up to you tomorrow and says, "Hi, would you like to abandon your family, give me all of your money, and follow me into the desert because I'm the chosen prophet of a cosmic octopus civilization?" Most people would probably decline. At least I hope so. No. The strange beliefs usually arrive much later, after trust has already been established, after relationships have already been formed, after people have invested time, money, energy, emotion, and their identity fully into the group. In other words, cults don't usually recruit people into bizarre beliefs. They slowly build a system where bizarre beliefs begin to feel normal. And that's where things really start getting interesting. Because the first step isn't belief. The first step is belonging. If there's one feature that's deeply embedded into the human mind, it's the need for social connection. Humans are tribal creatures. We've been tribal creatures for hundreds of thousands of years. For most of human history, being accepted by your group wasn't just emotionally rewarding. It was essential for survival. Being rejected by your tribe could mean losing protection, resources, and support. In some cases, it could literally mean death. So evolution built something into our brains, a powerful desire to belong. And that desire is still running in the background today. Even if you're sitting comfortably on your couch with air conditioning, Wi-Fi, and enough snacks to survive a small apocalypse, your brain still cares deeply about social acceptance and connections. This isn't weakness. It's human nature, and cults understand this better than most people. Many people who join cults aren't searching for strange beliefs. They're searching for connection. Maybe they're lonely. Maybe they've moved to a new city. Maybe they're grieving. Maybe they're struggling to find meaning. Or maybe they're just going through a period of uncertainty. Those situations don't make someone foolish. They make someone human. And when a group suddenly appears offering friendship, support, certainty, and purpose, that's incredibly attractive. This is where one of the most powerful recruitment techniques enters the picture, a technique so effective that it's used by cults, extremist groups, manipulative organizations, and occasionally that one overly enthusiastic coworker. It's called love bombing, and it works frighteningly well. Despite the name, love bombing isn't nearly as romantic as it sounds. It's not a Hallmark movie, it's not a Nicholas Sparks novel. It's a psychological recruitment strategy, and it's incredibly effective. When a group showers someone with acceptance and validation, it creates a powerful emotional bond. Researchers have found that social acceptance activates many of the same reward pathways in the brain that are involved in pleasure and reinforcement. In simple terms, being accepted feels good, and cults know it. Because once someone feels connected to a group, they're much more likely to trust that group. And trust changes everything. You stop evaluating information the same way. You become more open, more receptive, more willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, which sounds nice until someone starts using it against you. And that's where the next stage begins. One of the biggest threats to any cult isn't criticism, it's comparison. Because comparison creates perspective, and perspective creates questions. Questions are dangerous if you're trying to control people. So many cults begin creating distance between members and outside influences. Not all at once. That would be too obvious. Instead, it usually happens gradually. This creates something psychologists call information control. The group becomes the primary source of truth, and when that happens, reality starts shrinking. Your ability to evaluate the situation becomes much more limited. The same thing happens inside highly controlled groups. When outside perspectives disappear, the group's narrative becomes increasingly difficult to challenge. Not because it's true, but because it's uncontested. And here's the scary part. The mechanism isn't unique to cults. Human beings naturally drift towards environments that reinforce what they already believe. It's one reason social media algorithms can create echo chambers. It's one reason political polarization happens. It's one reason people can become convinced that everyone agrees with them when they rarely interact with anyone who doesn't. Now let's talk about one of the most powerful psychological principles ever discovered. Because contrary to popular belief, cults rarely ask for anything up front. They ask for something small. A meeting, a conversation, a book, a weekend retreat, a donation, a favor. Nothing dramatic. Nothing alarming. Psychologists call this the foot in the door effect. The idea is simple. People who agree to a small request become more likely to agree to larger requests later, not because they're being forced, but because they want to remain consistent. Humans also love consistency. We like believing our actions make sense. We like believing our decisions are rational. And once we make commitment, our brains start working overtime to justify it. Imagine someone spends a weekend with a group, then a month, then 6 months, then a year. At every stage, they become more invested, more connected, more committed, and every investment creates pressure to continue. Nobody likes admitting they've made a mistake, especially after investing time, energy, money, relationships, identity. This is known as the sunk cost effect. And this is one of the reasons people stay in situations long after the warning signs and all the red flags have appeared. Bad investments, bad relationships, bad jobs, and yes, bad cults. Because leaving doesn't just mean walking away. It means confronting the possibility that you were very wrong. And that's much harder than most people realize. Which brings us to the biggest misconception of all, the idea that intelligence protects people from these tactics. If cults use all these psychological techniques, why don't smart people see right through them? The answer is surprisingly simple. Because intelligence and vulnerability are not opposites. In fact, they often have very little to do with each other. Being intelligent doesn't make you immune to social pressure. It doesn't eliminate your need for belonging. It doesn't remove your desire for certainty. And it definitely doesn't stop you from wanting purpose, connection, meaning, or community. Those aren't bugs in the human mind. They're features. The same features that help us build friendships. The same features that help us build families. the same features that help us trust one another. Cults simply learn how to exploit them. And sometimes, intelligent people can be especially vulnerable, because once they commit to something, they're often very good at explaining why they were right, very good at defending their decisions. In other words, smart people aren't harder to fool. They're often better at convincing themselves. And that's what makes cults so fascinating. Not because cult members are fundamentally different from everyone else, but because they aren't. The uncomfortable truth is that under the right circumstances, almost anyone can become vulnerable. Not because they're weak, not because they're stupid, but because they're human. And that's really the lesson here. The psychology behind cults isn't some obscure phenomenon that only applies to strange fringe groups living on remote compounds. It's a window into how all human beings think. The good news is that understanding these mechanisms gives you something powerful: awareness. Awareness won't make you perfect. It won't make you impossible to manipulate, but it does make manipulation harder, because once you understand the code, you start noticing when someone is trying to run it. And that might be one of the most important things you can learn about the human operating system. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for new videos each week.